My name is Luke, and this is the story of Sarah and me. I'll tell you everything that happened around Valentine's Day, a tale not just of love but one filled with both affection and fear. I first met Sarah at a coffee shop. I was working on a project for my company when my eyes caught the sight of a girl sitting by the window, writing something in her diary. Her curly hair and dreamy eyes made me stop in my tracks. I grabbed my coffee and walked over to her. "That diary looks quite interesting," I said with a smile. Sarah looked at me in surprise, then smiled back. "Yes, this is my personal world. I'm Luke, and you are?" "Sarah," she said, extending her hand. After that encounter, our meetings became more frequent. Every weekend, we'd meet at a coffee shop or park. Sarah had a passion for writing, while I loved exploring new adventures. Our friendship slowly turned into love, and after every meeting, it felt like I had just experienced one of the most beautiful moments of my life. One day, while we were sitting by the lake watching the sunset, I held her hand and said, "Sarah, I can't imagine my life without you. Will you be a part of my life?" Sarah looked at me for a moment in silence, then with tears in her eyes, said, "I love you, Luke." That was the beginning of our love story. Every day brought new dreams, new plans. We had talked about the future so much. Everything felt perfect. Valentine's Day arrived. Sarah and I decided to spend the day in the park, with another couple, Jack and Emily, joining us. We were all excited. Everywhere, the air was filled with love as people wandered around with bouquets of flowers, and the scent of blooming roses surrounded us. As evening fell, we chose a quiet corner to sit and chat. I had a surprise gift for Sarah that I wanted to give her. But suddenly, the wind picked up, and everything started to feel strange. A shadow appeared under a tree in the distance. It was dressed in white, and its face was eerily blurred. It saw us and started moving towards Sarah. I immediately stood up. "What do you want?" I shouted. The figure didn't say a word. It simply stretched its hand towards Sarah, as if to take her. I quickly stepped in front of her. "You're not taking her," I said angrily. The figure stopped and let out a strange laugh. Then it spoke. "You don't know who this girl is, do you?" I stared at it, confused. "What are you talking about?" The figure replied, "3 years ago, she was my love. She tricked me with her love, took my money, and then killed me on a Valentine's Day. Now I've come to take my revenge." My breath caught in my throat. I turned to look at Sarah. "This is a lie, right?" At first, Sarah denied it, but when I swore my love to her, she lowered her head. "Luke, I'm ashamed. I did wrong back then. But I truly love you. I am loyal to you." The figure paused before saying, "If you are truly ashamed and loyal in your love, I'll leave you. But if you ever betray this man, I will return and I will not let you go." The figure slowly disappeared. We stood there in silence for a while. The wind in the park calmed down again. Jack and Emily had witnessed what happened, but they didn't say anything. We headed back home. A few days later, Sarah and I got married. Now, we have 3 beautiful children, and we're living a joyful life. Sarah had truly learned from her past, and she was now my true love. But the story doesn't end here. An odd thing happened. David, the shadow, visited our house 3 times just to check on how Sarah was doing with me. Each time, I told him the same thing. Sarah loves me, and we are happy together. Hearing this, David would always leave content. One night, as Sarah and I sat with our children telling stories, Sarah said to me, "Luke, I think David actually comes to pray for us. Maybe he has found freedom from his anger." I started to believe that too. Love has a way of forgiving mistakes. Perhaps that's why our love grew even stronger. And that was the story of Sarah and me, where Valentine's Day gave love a new meaning. My name is Alex, and I'm about to tell you a story that I'll never forget. It's a tale of an unusual encounter that changed the lives of my girlfriend and me. Kate and I first met at a famous book fair in New York. At the time, I was a little stressed about my job and had gone there to explore books on new topics. Everywhere around me, the scent of books and the noise of the crowd filled the air, but there was a corner where I felt a sense of calm. That was where Kate stood, holding an intriguing book. I walked towards the shelves of books and suddenly noticed her. She was lost in the pages of a book, her face serious, and her golden hair spread over her shoulders. I thought it might be a good moment to strike up a conversation. "How's the book?" I asked hesitantly. She looked up, surprised, but then smiled and said, "It's very interesting. You should read it too." She handed the book to me. "Alex," I introduced myself. "Kate," she replied. Right there, we started talking about books. It turned out that Kate was passionate about reading on various subjects and constantly experimenting to improve her life. There was a unique charm in her words that drew me closer to her. Over the next few weeks, we met several times. Sometimes at an art gallery, other times sitting in a park, discussing books. We had different personalities, but maybe it was those differences that brought us closer. Kate loved old buildings and history, while I was into new adventures and the beauty of nature. But one thing we had in common was our curiosity to explore life. One day, as we were walking through Central Park, Kate suddenly asked, "Alex, have you ever wondered what love really is?" Her face was serious, but her eyes still had that spark. I smiled and replied, "Love is probably when you're with someone and every moment feels special." She nodded. "Yeah, and maybe love is also when you want to be a part of someone else's dreams." Her words touched my heart deeply. 2 years passed, and our love grew deeper with each passing day. We celebrated every Valentine's Day in a new way. Sometimes in a mountain area, other times in a beautiful restaurant. Every year, Kate and I tried to do something special for Valentine's Day. This time, we had rented a cabin near a beautiful lake to spend a few peaceful moments in nature. Surrounded by tall trees by the lake, the soft whispers of the wind and the golden rays of the sun on the water created a magical atmosphere. The wooden cabin had windows with a perfect view of the lake. When we arrived, we felt this place could be the perfect backdrop for our love. It was evening, and the sun was setting as we walked hand in hand along the lake. A gentle breeze brushed against our faces. Kate smiled and said, "This place is truly magical, Alex. It feels like we're in a dream." I looked at her and replied, "Yeah, this moment really is special. Being close to nature always brings peace to the heart." Kate's smile filled my heart with joy. There was always a deep harmony between us, making every moment beautiful. As we continued walking by the lake, suddenly a strange man appeared in front of us. He was unexpectedly there, as though he had emerged from the earth. He wore a dark blue coat and had a polite demeanor, but his eyes held something that made me uneasy. There was a mysterious gleam in his eyes, as if he was eager to share countless stories. "Happy Valentine's Day," he said with a light smile. We nodded politely. "Thank you. Are you from around here?" I asked. He chuckled and replied, "Yes, but I'm not like ordinary people." Kate looked at me in surprise, but we didn't think much of it. There was something about him that, despite being strange, intrigued us. "Would you like to join us?" Kate asked, offering hospitality. Her voice always had a gentle kindness that drew people in. He laughed. "Thank you, but I'm here just to share some memories." There was an air of mystery in his words that we couldn't quite understand. But his tone was so captivating that we were ready to listen further. "Memories?" Kate asked with interest. "Yes, I want to share some thoughts about the meaning of love and the complexities of relationships." He spoke softly. We found his words odd, but we continued the conversation. He began telling us about how love could manifest in different forms and how every relationship required sacrifice and compromise. Kate nodded as she listened. This is really interesting. I've never looked at love this way before. Then suddenly, the man fell silent and said, "Remember, love always exists in reality, but not every lover is always human." His words touched our hearts but also left us uneasy. Before we could say anything, he suddenly disappeared. It was as if he had dissolved into the air. We were left stunned, staring at each other. That moment became an unforgettable experience in our lives. That night, we spent hours reflecting on the strange encounter, and many questions were swirling in my mind. Was the man we saw in the park real, or was it a part of a dream? Kate kept asking, "Did you see all that too?" And I couldn't find any words to answer. At that moment, I was trying to make sense of what had happened. Was it just our imagination, or was there something more to it? Kate's fear was growing. She would come close to me, looking into my eyes as if searching for something, and then suddenly look away. I tried to reassure her, but I wasn't sure myself whether what had happened was real or not. I couldn't fathom that there could be a logical explanation. When we returned to the cabin, both of us were silent. Our minds were full of questions, but neither of us had the courage to share them. We knew that this encounter would forever remain a mystery for us. The next morning, the light of day gave us some peace, but we still couldn't grasp the reality of that mysterious event. We decided to head back, and as we approached the lake, we saw a message written on a stone. It read, "Love always lives on, no matter who gives it." The words resonated in our hearts, leaving us with a strange echo. Kate lowered her gaze and read the message quietly, as if she too were trying to make sense of it. We both silently stared at the message for a while, and then decided that perhaps some questions in life don't have answers. That Valentine's Day was the most mysterious day of our lives, one we would never forget. Not only did it bring a new twist to our relationship, but it also taught us that there are some things in the world that can only be felt, and there is no scientific or logical explanation for them. It was a cold February evening, the kind where the air is sharp with chill and the streets are aglow with sparkling lights. The entire city was gearing up for Valentine's Day, with stores filled with red roses, heart-shaped chocolates, and decorations celebrating love. But for me, it was just another day. I never really cared much for Valentine's Day. Maybe it was because of the memories of past relationships that always lingered. Valentine's Day had always been a reminder of what I had lost. A few months ago, I moved to a new city to start fresh, leaving behind the old memories and attempting to escape the weight of them. My name is Aiden, and I mostly spent my time getting accustomed to my new surroundings and work routine. But that particular evening, something felt different. It was as if the very air carried an undercurrent of something unexpected. I was walking back from a small cafe, a warm coffee cup in my hand, when I noticed a small envelope in my mailbox. It had no name or address, just "For Aiden" written on it. My curiosity piqued, and I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper with neat handwriting, reading, "Meet me at the bench under the oak tree at midnight. I have something to show you." There was no signature, no clue as to who it was from. My heart began to race. Was this a joke? Or something else? The idea of meeting a stranger at night seemed strange, but something about it urged me to go. At around midnight, I made my way toward the park. The cold wind was biting, but the streetlights guided my path. When I reached the old oak tree, the bench was empty. No one was in sight. Just as I was about to turn back, a soft voice called out from behind me. "You came." I turned around, and there she was, standing in the soft glow of the streetlights, her hair flowing in the wind, her eyes glowing with an almost otherworldly spark. "Who are you?" I whispered. She smiled and took a step closer. "I'm the one you were waiting for." I stood frozen, staring at her. There was something about her, something I couldn't place, that felt oddly familiar. "You've been hiding a lot inside, Aiden," she said, her voice calm and soothing, as if she could see right through me. "But tonight, you need to let it all go." Before I could say anything, she handed me a small box. It was wrapped in simple brown paper, tied with a red ribbon. "Open it," she said. Slowly, I untied the ribbon and opened the box. Inside was a heart-shaped locket. The moment my fingers touched it, a strange sense of calm washed over me, a calm I hadn't felt in years. It was as if the locket was a piece of a forgotten past, now returned to me. "Why are you giving this to me?" I asked. She smiled gently. "Because it's time for you to let go of the past and look toward the future. You've been holding on for too long, Aiden. But I believe in you." I wanted to ask more, but when I looked up, she was gone, vanished, as though she had melted into the night air. I stood there in shock, unsure of what had just happened. The next morning, I woke up with a smile. I couldn't remember whether the whole encounter had been real or a dream, but when I opened the locket, there was a picture inside, of a woman I didn't recognize, standing beside me, as if we had known each other for a long time. It was as if this locket held a piece of a forgotten story, now revealed to me. I still don't know who that woman was or how she knew me, but one thing was for sure. After that night, something had changed. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready for love, ready to embrace the new beginnings that awaited me. That Valentine's Day became the most unexpected, yet life-changing day of my life. It was Valentine's Day, and the streets were filled with the colors of love. Heart-shaped balloons, the fragrance of colorful flowers, and bright lights created a cheerful atmosphere. Couples were spending time together, and everywhere you looked, there were clusters of love. Every moment of this day was filled with joy and affection. But to me, it all seemed ordinary, and this day held no special significance in my life. My name is Emily, and I had always seen Valentine's Day as just another regular day. The joy of this day had no effect on my heart. To me, the idea of love was simple. I was living an ordinary life, never particularly celebrating this day. I spent time with my friends, but the feeling of love within me was always a bit lacking. Besides, there was no one in my life to make me understand the importance of this day. That evening, I decided to go to a local restaurant for dinner with my friends. The atmosphere in the restaurant was also very cheerful. Everywhere, there were colorful lights, and heart-shaped decorations adorned the tables. We all ordered our meals and enjoyed a light-hearted conversation while eating. During all this, I didn't give much thought to the day or its significance. After finishing our meal, as we stepped outside, an odd feeling began to take over me. It was as if something had changed, or there was something mysterious in the air. I saw couples happily walking under pink balloons, but I felt like something unusual was happening. A cool breeze began to blow through the streets, sending chills down my spine. We headed towards the park, and along the way, I started to feel something strange. It was as if I had stepped into another world, one where there was no color of love, but a mysterious silence had taken over. With this strange atmosphere surrounding me, my heart raced, and I felt like something was about to happen, something I couldn't even imagine. When we reached the park, a cold wind started blowing, and suddenly, a shadow appeared in front of me. I immediately focused on it, and then it tried to disappear into the darkness. Its shape wasn't human, but something else. As I looked closer, I realized it resembled an animal. I couldn't bring myself to believe it, and my body began to shake. My heart rate sped up, and I took a deep breath. "Did you see that?" I asked my friend, who was still staring at me. "What? Where?" he replied, but I saw the shadow again, and this time it came straight towards me. My breath stopped. It wasn't human. It was some kind of hovering, mysterious form, moving towards me. Its body was black, and its eyes were blood red. There was a strange gleam in those eyes, like it wasn't coming to acknowledge me, but to claim me. A wave of fear washed over me. "What?" I barely managed to say. The shadow came closer, and suddenly, its form transformed into a horrifying human figure. Its face was twisted, as if it had been contorted in anger or distress. The eyes glowed with an unfamiliar light, and the smile it wore was one of terror and dominance. It was only a few steps away from me, and I knew this was going to be the scariest moment of my life. "Do you know who I am?" it asked in a deep, heavy voice. The intensity in its voice made it seem like it had reached into my very soul. "What did you do to me?" Its voice echoed in my ears, and it felt like an order rather than a question. My heart pounded faster, and I quickly looked around for my friend, but he was gone. I was alone now. That was the moment I realized I had fallen into the trap of the shadow. "Don't you recognize me?" I barely spoke, but its response was not what I expected. The shadow continued to move towards me, and I couldn't move my feet. "You have no idea what's going to happen to you, Emily," it said. Its voice so strong I didn't know what was going to happen next. It kept coming towards me, and I felt like I was sinking into a deep, endless darkness. My body trembled with fear, and I tried to think of something to do, but my courage had failed me. Just then, I heard a sharp noise, and I quickly turned around. A beam of light appeared before me, shining like a bright glimmer in the dark night. The shadow instantly disappeared, as if it had never existed. It was like its presence was only in my mind. I felt a slight sense of relief, but then the voice that had left a question in my heart returned to echo. My body trembled, and my heart raced uncontrollably. I was still unable to move past the horrifying experience, and that deep fear lingered in my eyes. I couldn't make sense of it all. Was the shadow and that person real? Was it a ghost? Or had it all been my imagination, lost in the cold wind and the silence of the night? When I returned home, I found a pink rose in my bedroom. It was sitting there in front of me, and I looked at it curiously. Where did this rose come from? And who had left it in my room? My eyes were fixed on the rose. It, which was typically seen as a symbol of love, had now become a haunting reminder for me. The mystery of the rose, the terrifying event, everything echoed in my heart and mind as a question. My mind was full of questions. Was that shadow, that terrifying figure, real? Or was it all a result of my mental state? But then, that rose, which was always a symbol of love, had now become a terrifying memory for me. That rose still sits in my room, and I know I will never understand its secret. Valentine's Day has now become a horrific and mysterious memory in my mind, one whose secret I will never uncover. It wasn't just a symbol of love, but also a door to a terrifying reality for me. What I experienced that day will always stay with me, and I know I will never escape it. It was Valentine's Day night, and the streets of the city were filled with the vibrant energy of love. The entire town was adorned with bright lights, and the air was thick with romance. Couples walked hand in hand, parks were filled with children handing out small gifts, and restaurants were buzzing with excitement. It was a night that seemed perfect, the air filled with sweet emotions, and everyone celebrating love in their own way. But for Zoya, this night was going to be something entirely different. Zoya sat in an old cafe with her best friend, Sarah. It was located a little away from the city center, a quiet, somewhat isolated spot. The place had once been popular, but now had a few visitors due to rumors surrounding its strange and eerie past. The ambience was old, with dim lighting, and the furniture worn with age, giving the place an almost mysterious, haunted feel. "I don't know, this place feels kind of odd, right?" Sarah said, taking a sip of her coffee. "It's a little quiet, but the coffee tastes amazing," Zoya replied, trying to make the best of it. She'd always been drawn to such places. Old, forgotten corners of the world that hid secrets in their cracks. As they chatted, the door suddenly creaked open. A strange figure walked in. He was dressed head to toe in black, his movements calm and purposeful. In his hand, He held a single rose, which looked oddly out of place against his dark attire. He walked straight toward Zoya's table, placed the rose gently in front of her, and said in a low, eerie voice, "This is for you." Zoya looked up at him in surprise. "Why me?" Without saying another word, the man turned and walked out. Zoya couldn't help but feel an unsettling sense of dread as she stared at the rose. The petals were deep red, almost like they were bleeding, and the thorns seemed sharper than usual. Curiosity mixed with discomfort. Zoya reached out and picked up the rose. As soon as her fingers touched it, a whisper filled her ears. For love, one must sacrifice their life. Zoya's heart raced. "Sarah, did you hear that?" Sarah looked up, confused. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" Zoya set the rose back on the table, but as she did, something bizarre happened. The rose began to bleed. Dark red liquid seeped from its petals. Zoya's face turned pale. "What is this?" Sarah cried out in fear. Zoya grabbed the rose again, but now it no longer looked like a simple flower. It had morphed into something twisted. Its petals turned into jagged, blackened spikes. Terrified, Zoya threw the rose to the ground, and at that moment, the lights in the cafe flickered and went out. The entire place plunged into darkness. The sound of their frantic breathing filled the air as the two girls screamed, trying to find the exit. Zoya grabbed Sarah's hand, and they rushed toward the door, fear pushing them forward. "We need to get out of here now," Zoya shouted, her voice shaking. As they stumbled out into the street, Zoya turned back. The man was standing there in the doorway, smiling. His cold smile sent a chill down her spine. "You rejected my rose, Zoya. Now I'll never let you go," he said ominously, his voice carrying across the street. But what Zoya didn't know was that this man was not just a stranger. He was something far more dangerous. He wasn't just any figure. He was an ancient, restless soul, tied to Zoya in ways she couldn't yet understand. The connection between Zoya and the mysterious figure. Zoya's connection to this strange, dark figure wasn't a coincidence. The man was not just a random stranger. He was a restless spirit tied to Zoya through a past life. This wasn't the first time their paths had crossed. Years ago, in a past life, Zoya had been involved with this spirit. She had unknowingly crossed a line, making choices that had trapped her in a dangerous relationship with him. The spirit had once been a lover, a companion, someone Zoya had cared for deeply, but a tragic event and betrayal had caused their separation, and the spirit was left seeking vengeance. In this new life, Zoya was unaware of the past that connected them. She had no idea that the love she had felt once for this man had turned into a curse, a bond that couldn't be broken. The rose was a symbol, a trap, drawing Zoya back to him. The man, now a shadow of his former self, had been searching for Zoya, trying to reclaim their lost connection. The rose, as beautiful as it appeared, was a sinister offering, a symbol of the life he demanded in return for love. Zoya had rejected him before, and now the spirit was determined to make her pay for it. Zoya's heart raced as she realized the truth. This spirit wasn't just trying to harm her, it was trying to reclaim what he had once lost. The bloodied rose, the eerie whispers, and the man's ghostly presence were all a part of a greater, darker force tied to her very existence. Zoya had been unknowingly caught in a cycle of love and vengeance. As she stood there, gazing at the dark figure from across the street, she knew her life was forever changed. This night wasn't just about a strange encounter. It was about confronting a past she had long forgotten and trying to break free from a love that was never meant to be. The figure would continue to haunt her, but now Zoya had to make a choice. Would she give in to the spirit's demands, or would she fight to break the curse of their ancient bond?